Welcome to the System Read podcasts. I'm Sarah, and today we are deconstructing a book that has become something of a holy text for the modern minimalist investor. J.L. Collins' The Simple Path to Wealth. Joining me is our resident systems expert, Marcus. Marcus, I'll be blunt. I find Collins' philosophy to be a seductive, yet dangerously lazy oversimplification.
Lazy or efficient, Sarah. Collins isn't just giving a how-to on buying index funds. He's describing a system designed to remove the charlatans from the equation. He argues that complexity is a trap manufactured by the financial industry to justify high fees and transfer your wealth into their pockets. To me, it's about mathematical inevitability.
But inevitability assumes a stagnant world. Let's start with his core psychological driver. F.U. money. Collins frames it as the ultimate freedom, the ability to say no to a job you hate or a boss you don't respect. He even uses a parable of a monk and a minister to suggest that if you can learn to live on rice and beans, you don't have to cater to the king. My issue is that this monk-like mentality ignores the opportunity cost of ambition. If everyone is just stepping to the side, who is building the future?
That's a misreading, Sarah. F.U. money isn't about laziness, it's about options. Collins himself worked 18-hour days at times. The system he's building ensures that work becomes a choice, not a form of gilded slavery. He points out that most people match or even exceed their lifestyle to their income, which effectively chains them to a desk. By maintaining a 50% savings rate and avoiding the leech of debt, you buy back your life energy. Is it deprivation to own your time?
It's deprivation if the pursuit of monkhood prevents you from taking calculated risks in your career or business because you're too focused on the simple path. And that leads us to the heart of his strategy, VTSAX, Vanguard's Total Stock Market Index Fund. Marcus, Collins treats VTSAX like a magic pill. He argues that since you can't pick winning stocks, and neither can the pros, you should just buy the entire glass of beer. I call that a surrender. In a volatile 2026 economy, why would I want to own the dead and dying companies that are dragging down the index?
Because the index is self-cleansing, Sarah. This is the systemic beauty Collins highlights. When a company fails, it drops off the index. Meanwhile, the winners have no limit on their upside. You aren't surrendering. You are betting on the collective ingenuity of 3,700 companies filled with people working relentlessly to prosper. He argues that professional management is the real risk because they charge you fees, often 1 to 2%, to consistently underperform the market. Over decades, that fee is a devil's ball and chain on your wealth.
But what about market timing? Collins claims it's impossible. He tells us to toughen up and ride out the crashes. But what if the market doesn't recover for 20 years? He mentions the big ugly event of 1929, where it took until the mid-1950s to recover. In today's high-speed, algorithmic world, blindly holding a single index fund while a crash wipes out 50% of your net worth isn't tough. It's negligent.
That's where the owner versus lender mentality comes in. When you own VTSAX, you aren't just holding data on a screen, you own pieces of real businesses. Collins distinguishes between the beer, the underlying business earnings, and the foam, the daily market volatility. He argues that as long as the businesses are sound, the foam doesn't matter. And even if you bought at the very peak in 1929, you only lost everything if you panicked and sold or bought on margin. If you have a 40 to 70-year horizon, a crash is just stocks on sale.
Let's talk about that horizon, though. Collins promotes the 4% rule for withdrawal, based on the Trinity Study. He suggests that if you can live on 4% of your stash, you are financially independent. But Marcus, that study ended in 2009. Between 1975 and 2015, the market returned a breathtaking 11.9% average. Relying on those specific historical tailwinds to justify a 4% withdrawal rate in a decade of higher inflation and lower growth seems like a recipe for dining on dog food in your 70s.
Collins actually addresses that. He calls for sensible flexibility. The 4% isn't a suicide pact. It's a guideline. If the market tanks, you cut your spending. He also highlights the difference between the wealth accumulation stage, where you are 100% in stocks to maximize growth, and the wealth preservation stage, where you add bonds, VBTLX, to smooth the ride and act as a deflation hedge. This isn't a static system. It's a living allocation that adjusts to your risk tolerance.
Even his view on bonds feels outdated. He dismisses international funds entirely, arguing that US companies like Apple and Coca-Cola already provide international exposure without the currency risk or accounting risk. I find that narrow-minded. By ignoring the emerging markets of the next 20 years, he's locking his simple path into a US-centric silo that might not remain the most powerful country forever.
But the data shows world markets are becoming increasingly correlated anyway. Adding international funds often adds more expense and complexity for subpar performance. Collins's entire philosophy is built on failing less. He admits he made $50,000 mistakes chasing gold mining stocks. The simple path is a masterclass in efficiency precisely because it removes the investor's own ego from the system. It's a way to ensure that even a lazy person can outperform 82% of the experts just by standing still.
Or it's a marketing myth for the masses who are too afraid to actually learn how the machine works. If you don't understand the alpha and beta of what you own, are you really independent? Or are you just a passenger on Vanguard's ship?
In the end, Sarah, whether it's a masterclass or a myth, depends on one thing: toughness. Collins is clear. The path is simple, but it isn't easy. If you can't watch your net worth drop by 50% and do nothing, the system fails. But if you can, you don't just get wealth. You get the freedom to never be a gilded slave again.
A sobering thought. Perhaps the simple path is less about the math and more about the mastery of one's own fear. Until next time, this has been The System Read.
Thank you for listening to this discussion on the System Read podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the like button and subscribe to ensure you don't miss our upcoming deep dives.